Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here at Amity Hall downtown for our annual New York City Marathon Strategies for Success. So my name is Coach Kris Forti, and I'm joined here by
Coach Kristen.
And we're here to walk through the marathon almost step by step between the course, what to do over the next 2 weeks, and then also even what to do beyond the marathon as well. So we'll talk a little bit about all of these things as we go through the next, hopefully around 60 minutes or so. Okay. So want to fully introduce yourself?
Nope.
To the crew?
Yes. I'm Kristen. I'm one of the coaches for the Whippets and frequent marathoner. That's my story.
That's it. All right, and I'm Coach Kris Forti. I've been coaching the Whippets for 6 years now, and assisting with all the other coaches to develop all the training plans. We attend meetups and practices. We all work with folks privately as well, so you're welcome to reach out with us with questions at any time. Before we kind of kick off the full presentation, so reminders for everybody who's watching us today. For those who are joining us online, you're welcome to enter any questions you have in the chat. We're monitoring the chat function so we can answer questions real time. And that also applies to everybody here joining us. You're welcome to ask anything at any time as we go through the presentation. One reminder that we're looking at is we've created thanks to the help of Mo, who's sitting here in front of us. Thank you. Created a Google form for everybody to fill out with your corral assignments and your estimated start times. And within the last couple of days before the race, probably Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, we'll email those out in small groups to everyone so people can communicate freely amongst themselves about partnering up or grouping up together to execute the race. So please feel free to fill out the Google Doc that we shared out. So as we get into the next couple of weeks, obviously we're now into taper mode, right? So the idea here is to do all the things you've probably neglected over the last 4 to 6 weeks during your high mileage periods, right? But with that said, I think, one of the things we're not going to do here is I'm not a big fan of just reading the slides. So we're just going to add color to some of these slides. My big takeaway on this as we lead into the next couple of weeks is tapering is not just running easy for the next 2 weeks. It is doing all the things you've been doing, just doing less of it. So still continue to, like tomorrow is, on the training plan, we have a couple of miles at marathon pace put into the plan. That's on purpose. It's, if you're lifting, if you're doing non-running cross training, stuff like that, continue to do those things, just decrease the intensity, decrease the minutes, but don't completely change your entire routine and just start running easy for the next 2 weeks. That is very counterproductive to everything your muscles have developed over the last mostly 8 to 12 weeks.
Yes, I agree with that. And in terms of that, the fueling and nutrition component, you don't want to make a lot of big changes. What you want to do is make small changes often, right? So on a daily basis, make sure you're hydrating really well. On a daily basis, eat a little more carbs than you would otherwise be eating, right? You don't need to do anything drastic at all. So I've had people that are like, well, I ate pasta for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and all of a sudden I didn't feel so good. Don't do that, because that's like your body's not used to it, and there's no reason to make those kinds of huge changes. What you want to do is just spread it out over a couple of days and take it a little bit at a time and make small adjustments. In terms of the race strategy, we're going to go over the course in great detail, but if you want to, I do recommend you do some of your own research. All of the information that's in this presentation is listed on the website. And so you can go and get the elevation profile yourself. You can go and actually get a course adjusted pace band based on your target race time. All of these resources are available to you, so feel free to do that. And we're also available to help with that in more detail if you need it. Next slide.
Sure, next up. So we're gonna get right into kind of leading straight into the race as we look into the Expo. So we've noted here the hours, and again, reservations to pick up your bibs. This is all noted on our website and will be here in the presentation. I'm gonna skip through to the next one, which is so just some details about, you must pick up your own bib, designated times, make sure you bring your IDs, etc. They won't accept, just a photocopy, a picture of your driver's license when you show up. Like, you bring all the IDs. If you're thinking about, if you have friends and family maybe traveling into the city to watch you run the race, the Expo is open to the public. Go Thursday, Friday, because Saturday is pretty insane. People who obviously travel, come out of town, they're trying to keep their costs down with hotels, so they're all coming in on Saturday to the Expo, so stay away from that. And I think last thing here is, again, you'll hear this repeatedly throughout the course of this presentation, is nothing new on race day. So you're welcome to shop to your heart's content at the Expo. Just consider not wearing those objects or bring on for the first time on race day.
Yeah, and the Expo this year is going to be back to what it used to be, and a lot of us don't really remember that because it was 2019 since the last time we had like a real New York City Expo. But prepare for the crowds, prepare for it to take a long time to get through there. And all the vendors are supposed to be back. All of the presentations are supposed to be back. And so, I do recommend you give yourself, a good block of time to go and, take your time going through. But as Kris said, nothing new on race day. And also, try not to spend all day Saturday on your feet running around. Just don't. Sunday's going to be long enough. Conserve your energy. Try to make Saturday be a low key day where you're, sitting with your feet up for most of the day.
Yeah, and even if those of us here in New York City will take public transportation out to the Expo. You get off the 7 train to Hudson Yards. You walk around. It's very easy to do 12, 15,000 steps just simply walking through the Expo. So try to keep that to a minimum as much as possible. So again, not try to avoid that on Saturday. So some specifics here on bag check.
Yeah, this is a new thing. Well, they started it last year for COVID and they've carried it over. There's no bag check on Staten Island at all. So you have to, if you want to have something after the race, you have to drop it off on Friday or Saturday. Everything that you bring with you to the starting village, you will have to run with it or you will have to throw it away. Those are the only two choices. If you didn't pick bag check already, then unfortunately you're out of luck. The option is no longer available. But if you did, make sure you get all your stuff together. You have to put it in the bag that you get at the Expo, one of their clear bags. And so you have to just plan for this in advance, right? Don't wait until Saturday afternoon to figure this part out. Do some thinking about it now or tomorrow.
In particular, I think the one thing that most people will want when the race is over is their cell phones. So again, if you want your cell phone after the race, you will have to deposit it when you drop off your bag, which means going without your phone potentially for a couple of days. So just be aware of that fact as well.
Yeah, it's a pain, but.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about the night before. I think the one important thing that we've called out here in bold, underline, italics, and all of the things is the clocks change. So you all get an extra night's sleep, but be aware that the clocks actually change. So, just plan that ahead. Obviously we all live in an age of technology. Watches and phones will change on their own, but if you have an alarm clock, if you're like me and you still have an old school alarm clock in your bedroom, you don't wake up to your cell phone, then you're going to want to change that ahead of time and be aware of that.
I'm big into the putting everything out like like your first day of kindergarten. I do that for every race. And so I just think it takes a lot of the stress out of it, because the morning of, you're going to be like, thinking about 800 things, and you're going to be tired because you've had a restless night. And so just do yourself a favor, Saturday, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever it is, get your shoes out, get your socks out, get, your body glide, all of these things, the little silly things that you're going to forget, your fuel, all of that, get them all out, lay them out, make it in a nice, little pile ready for you to go the next morning. So you don't have to think about anything. You don't have to look for anything. It's all there ready for you when the morning comes.
And it also gives you a reason to put out flat runner for your Instagram photo.
That's it.
So it's all about the social media content.
Do it for the gram.
So there's a question in the chat I noticed about changing the clocks. The government is discussing that right now. It is in process. That in the earliest it would happen would be next year. That is not to happen this year.
Good question. People are
Yes.
up on it.
Yeah. So race morning itself. I think the important thing is, how are you getting there? So again, we talked about planning that. You've probably already had to choose how you're actually going to do this, whether you're getting on a bus in Midtown, whether you're taking the ferry over and then taking the buses once you get on Staten Island, crashing with a friend on Staten Island. I'm looking at some of you on the phone right now who are crashing in my place. Just whatever your way there is, just make sure you have that prepared. And I think this is probably better for you to answer than me, which would be, your apartment is much warmer than it is on Staten Island.
Yes. That is true. Yeah. So bring layers. I have, I don't know about anybody else, but I have a pile of things that I don't wear anymore. And so I always just have this is my, wear to Staten Island clothes, old things that I'm going to get rid of, things I don't want anymore, things that are useful, bathrobes, fleece, little fleece blankets that you get on traveling on an airplane, maybe. My super top secret is these thick trash bags, like the really thick ones,
Like industrial strength
the industrial
bags.
strength, and they're long, they're really big. So I just tear a hole where my head goes, and it goes down to about my ankles, and it keeps my body heat in. And this is the other part of this secret is, so I wear that all the way up until the start line, and then on the start line, I literally just I do this like superhero thing, and I rip it off. And I'm ready to go. So it keeps me warm up until that last second. If you do have throwaway clothes, you don't want to wear them all the way up to the start line on the bridge, because you're going to be packed in. And also, once you get up to that bridge start line, that you're going to hear a cannon and you're going to have to run. So you don't want to have to be like, oh, let me take this off. And then like there's thousands of people pushing past you and everything. So if you have throwaway clothes, you want to take them off on your way up to the bridge or in the corral. That's a whole process. There's minutes in there. You'll know, you'll be standing in the corral and it feels like an eternity because you're nervous and everything. But you'll have plenty of time to take all your layers off then. Question: no opaque trash bags, must be clear. Well, that is interesting to me. Okay. Clear trash bag, says the website. I have not worn a clear trash bag, but a clear trash bag would work as well. The whole point is the plastic just keeps your body heat in. And so that's the whole idea behind the trash bag.
I think another one too is bring the second pair of socks. Because a significant amount of time you're out there, you're likely going to be standing on grass, which could be wet. And you bring a pair of shoes that you're going to discard, and you bring a pair of socks that you're going to discard as well. Don't think that what you're walking out in, you're actually going to run it, other than what your base layers are. Same goes for footwear. You're going to be out there and it's going to be chilly, and make sure you're bringing extra socks and shoes that you're physically holding those in your hands as you head out there.
Yep, totally.
lot of the bib information here, just some basics about your start. Oh, sorry, Carl.
Yes, you can wear a belt, but you can't wear anything over the shoulders.
Yes.
So no vests or camelbacks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just around the waist. Yeah.
Around the waist is good,
Yeah.
yeah. One thing I wanted to say about this slide is that there are 900 people, that's what that says, right?
Yeah.
900 people in each corral. So somebody asked this question before. They wanted to move up to the back of a corral instead of starting in the front of a wave behind. I mean, you can, but there's literally 900 times 6 in front of you at that point. It's better to be in the front of a wave than at the very, very back of another wave. Even if the time is, quote, slower, it's just a better position to start yourself, right? So think about it from a where do I want to run from position, not an ego about what's my time, you know, where am I starting from kind of thing.
But the one caveat is that if you do opt to go for a slower wave, you cannot start in the first corral of said wave. So if you are in wave 2 and you decide to go back to wave 3, you cannot be in the first. You must start in corral B of wherever you are.
That was a person that was assigned to that wave that was wanting to move up.
And we've had other questions too
Yes.
ahead of this come in about, can you move laterally when it comes to colors as well? So from what we've been told, that Roadrunners does not have a rule prohibiting you from switching from one color to the next. So if you want to run with a friend who is in orange B and you're in green B, one of you can swap. With that said, that directive isn't always moved down to the actual volunteers that day. So they communicate that it is not a rule, but that doesn't mean that a volunteer may take it upon themselves to be like, no, you can't come in this corral, you have to go to your color. So just be wary that that is a possibility. So I don't want to sit here today and promise you that if you opt to switch that you can with certainty do it. That's what was communicated to us by Roadrunners.
Yeah, the color thing is it's a gray area. Waves and corral
Gray's not a color.
wise. What?
Gray's not a color.
That's a joke.
Get a little humor into this.
Ha 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 ha. Okay,
Fine.
okay. You can move back.
Yes. So the start village itself, and we've talked a little bit about this already. You know, and as you get into this, it becomes, the closer you get to the start line, the more secure it becomes. They start, you know, the security detail becomes stronger, becomes, you know, much more difficult. You know, as someone I'll be in the start village in the morning, you know, they go through my stuff. Like, it's just not because I have a credential doesn't mean they don't go through all of my crap too. You know, I still have to obey by the same rules. I have to bring it out, you know, a clear trash bag for all of my belongings for the day. I can't bring a regular backpack. Like, it is pretty tight security as you get closer and closer to the start village.
Yes, and they check your bibs to go into the corrals, and the corrals are physically, the colors and the corrals are divided. And so there is a separate entrance, right? So if you're in corral B, your entrance is not the same as the entrance for corral C. And so just, you'll have to read the signs, but know that when you're going in, you'll be checked, and that's the reason you want to make sure you know where to go. And the other thing about the start villages is each of the start villages have their own porta potty setups. And so, you know, a lot of times you get there early enough, you have time to wander around. There's plenty of time to use the bathroom multiple times. There are also porta potties in the corrals. So if you're like just happening around and you see there's not a line, I recommend, or a short line, I recommend going in and going ahead, because some of the corrals, or some of the colors, I mean, can get really jammed up with the with the runners from that wave. Particularly this Orange Village, because the Orange Village is what you come to first when you get through security. And so a lot of people sort of just make a beeline for those porta potties, but if you walk in further, you can actually find more. So all the porta potty secrets right here.
If you want to walk up, is there any area like at the stop line?
I would, yeah. So what if you want to? The question was if you want to warm up. What you do is you'll be standing in the corrals. They will close the corrals. Then they will walk you up to the start line onto the bridge. So you start off to the side and you have you know, whatever, a quarter of a mile to go up to the bridge. So there is some time there. It would be a little chaotic, but I think you could, you know, you could do some drills back and forth there as you're going up to the
Like
start.
if you look at this, again, it's hard to see on this, but you can see, you know, the green wave starts down on Marshall Road. You can see each of the, you know, A through F. And then you have the orange corrals up on Drum Road. And then you have the blue corrals up on Coast Guard Road. So that's where you queue up. And then they essentially start breaking the tapes. And then you walk the distance from A into each of the colors that are listed there. So there is some walking distance in between each. And again, as people start to walk, you're likely going to start seeing people like start actually, you know, start moving their bodies around because you've been standing still for a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's where you can do some movement there.
And there was another question that came in before about trying to meet up with the pacer that was not in their assigned corral. The time to try to do that is when they drop the tape and you start walking up to the start line. There's plenty of time and plenty of, you know, shuffling around. If you can see the pacer sign ahead of you, you can certainly get up to them. Position yourself in a good place to the edges, so you can, like, when they start walking, you can, like, you know, hustle your way around to get to people.
Don't read it.
Okay.
So for the start itself, there are, you know, there's obviously many amenities at the start as well, including all of, you know, if those who may want some coffee, whatever you're looking for that morning. But just, you know, remember, just, you know, bring all the things you'll need to survive on your own out there, essentially, between whatever you carry and clothing.
I want to make a recommendation about fueling, which is like, I recommend you have something when you get up, either when you're getting up and you get dressed, or thing I've done is I actually have eaten oatmeal on the bus, because the bus ride it's a long bus ride. But then also having something else while you're waiting in the start village, because you will have an hour and a half plus in most cases. So you need something else to really top you up before you start. And so these are the options that are available to you, provided by the race, but you can also obviously bring your own stuff.
And then we have options of when nature calls. So again, we've talked a little bit about this, about, you know, where to find toilets and to try to navigate around that. Yes, the bottom bullet point is very apropos, because that does happen. So be careful of that. And there was a joking comments that you can add to this. The advantage of certain genders, you have the ability to maybe bring your own water bottle with you as you head into the corral. So that is also an option. And then not.
In terms of the porta potties, another secret, when you start walking up to the start line, when they drop the tape and you start walking, that's, if you have been holding it in and you hadn't had a chance to go, that is a time to duck into the porta potties right then as well. Because people will be concentrating on getting to the start line, and so they won't be waiting there in lines anymore.
Just a quick recap of here are the various start times, depending on which division you are in. So we have And then now we'll get into discussing the actual race course itself.
Woo-hoo.
So just some basics here. There's obviously mile markers and every 5K, timing mats at various points throughout the race course, and then porta potties and medical after mile 3, given the first 2 miles are on a bridge.
I like knowing where the timing mats are, where the clocks actually are for, because it's useful to know, to compare to what you have on your watch. So when you cross the start line, if you're not in one of the first waves, especially because the clocks will be timed for the first wave, just take a look and see what it says. You know, you don't need to know every second, but you know, roughly, if it says like 30 minutes on it when you start, then when you pass the timing mat at the half, you'll want to know what that time is plus 30 minutes. It's just useful to know. So I do recommend using the tools that you have available to you. Your watch will be slightly off, and it'll get more off as you go. Distance wise, they tend to overestimate. So I have a slide in here we'll get to what my watch is clocked every time. But any case, so when you hit the actual mile markers and the actual timing mats, that is the official chip time. And so it's not going to match up exactly with your watch, but that's the time that you want to run, the time that they have, right? Not what your watch is.
So we'll talk a little bit here about the crowds and crowding, as what we've noted here at the bottom. The median finish time for New York City is over 4.5 hours. And this is over the past like 4 or 5 years. We look at this. So this is something that that you want to keep in mind when you're out there. I will say the median finish time for the Whippets. So we usually, over the last 5 years, we have more than 200 athletes finish the race every year. And the team's median finish time is right around 3:42, 3:43. So that's the team's median finish time.
But this picture, just so we like the larger picture is that's First Avenue. So that's mile like 16, 17, and 18. If you can see how crowded that is, that's how crowded this race is. It doesn't get very empty unless you're like way at the, if you're like a sub 3 or you won't deal with this. But for most everybody else, that's what you're going to be looking at from mile 1 to mile 25.5, no, really all the way to the end.
We'll talk a little bit here about some of the fueling options, water and Gatorade, what's available, banana options, and the gel spots. I think one tip that I've tried to use, I've suggested in the past is, yes, there's water beginning at mile 3, but many of those who don't have experience doing New York, or maybe don't come to strategy sessions like this, don't hear some of these tips. It's a good idea to carry those half pint Poland Spring bottle with either Noon in it, water in it, Gator, whatever your preferred beverage is, to carry you through at almost to 10K. Try to be self-sufficient with your own liquids through 10K. Because when you get off the bridge at around 2.5, everybody's diving for that water spot, like those tables and that Gatorade. So if you can try to be self-sufficient, look, I'm not going to sit here and say it's not annoying to carry stuff in your hands. It is. But if you have to carry it just early on in the race and then ditch it, and then your hands become free and you can relax, I just think that you want to try to be as self-sufficient liquid-wise as you can through at least the 10K in Park Slope. And then after that, you can start grabbing common stuff on the tables that's available to everybody.
Yeah, another tip with the aid stations, they're really long. They're like a full block long, and they're on both sides. And so there'll be people strung out at the end. Those are the people I go to, the individuals that are way at the end. Like people don't go to them because they always go right to the first, they make a beeline to the first table there, and you still have, hundreds of feet of table to go, and people at the end, to go to as well. So you can pass by a little bit of the aid station and then go in to get your cup. You'll have less people to deal with if you do that.
Do they have water bottles at the start village, or should you bring your own? Like, could you pick one up on the day of?
No, you bring it, I like be completely self-sufficient. Like carry all the, again, put it in your bag, your clear bag. But yeah, it's bring all the things. I think the half pints are, again, they're very small. You can, they easily fit in the palm of your hand versus a traditional, 16-ounce bottle, right? It's, kidding aside, it is half the size of that. So they're just easier to wrap your hands around. You can have, one water, one Gatorade, and then ditch it as you're heading down 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. Also on the fueling thing too, I think as you go, navigating the tables, I think can be a struggle, right? They can be, this is where I kind of become a jerk a little bit. Kind of protect your space, remind yourself that, when you're out there, be aware that someone is going to cut you off. And if someone does, don't be afraid to remind them that they have. Now, I'm not saying actively push someone to the ground, but rubbing is racing, and hands out, make sure no one steps, if you're about to take a step out, that no one takes that space in front of you. Like, again, I'm not saying actively shove someone to the ground, but don't be afraid to tap someone in the arm or tap someone in the lower back or push, particularly the hip is a real good place, by the way, like right at the hip, because it changes the center of gravity. So it's a real good spot to make sure someone gets out of your way. So find the waist. It's, this is coming, sorry, 4 years of collegiate track, you just learn all the tricks. But it applies to the marathon, that when you're out there in this crowded space, that just make sure that you protect the environment around you. And this is an example of how, what a water station looks like. Again, both sides of the city block and all the cups on the grounds. So just, be mindful. They do a pretty good job early on of raking out as many of the cups as they can. The volunteers do a good job. And this photo is not an indication of knocking road runners. Like, they're out there with rakes and they're pulling stuff away. But it's at some point, it's not going to be feasible for them to do it.
And this year it's SIS gels. So that's the newer NYRR fuel sponsor. So if you haven't been using them, don't try them out for the first time on the race day, but do, consider trying them out here in the next 2 weeks. I put this in just as a comparison because I know some of you have run these other races this year. Like, some of you just ran Berlin, some of you just ran Chicago, or ran London this year as well. So this is just a comparison for you to see how different they are in a quick graphic form, right? So if you just ran Berlin or Chicago, New York could not be more different of a course. Prepare yourself, right? So don't go, well, I ran this time in Berlin, so I can definitely run this time in New York. That's not an apples to apples comparison. And we're going to go through more of the course in detail, but this is just an example of the difference, right? So the elevation gain for New York, they have it clocked here as 932 feet. It's significant.
Yeah.
Right at the back, that the first big bump is Queensborough, not like the bridge, and then as you follow along, visualize in the middle.
Yeah, the middle.
The middle is the Queensborough.
Yeah, we're
yes.
gonna go. Yeah.
Yeah. So and again, to put some numbers to it, because I was actually just looking at this for course certification purposes. Metrically, because everything's done in metric on the course certifications, it is the peak of the Verrazano is 79 meters above sea level. So the first mile is 79 meters up. The Queensborough is the cap of that is 37 meters.
I have that slide.
So okay.
Yeah, it's the next one.
Yeah.
I think it's the next one. Hey, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this is the actual on the one side, this is what my Garmin has clocked. And so I started from the orange one time, and then I started from the green the other time. Both times I came out with 26.4 both times. And so just to gauge what, how much over, but in terms of the climbs, the first climb is 150 feet over a mile. It's a full mile long, that first climb. But the beautiful thing about that is you're literally at mile 1, and so you won't notice, and there's a whole bunch of things going on, excitement wise and energy wise and scenic wise. You can see the whole, you know, downtown Manhattan. It's beautiful. So you won't even notice that. But these later climbs, you will certainly notice. The Queensborough climb, which was brought up, is 100 feet over 3/4 of a mile. So that's pretty big. And then what I really think is the worst climb in the entire race is this Fifth Avenue climb into Central Park. It starts around mile 23 and it finishes at mile 24, and it's 80 feet over a mile there. It's a rough part. It's a rough section. And so you need to know that you're going to slow down some there. Try not to slow down too much. The other thing that sucks about that climb is, like, with the bridges, you go up, but you get the down right away on the other side. It's like instant gratification. You're like, I made it. And there's none of that there, that Fifth Avenue climb. No gratification. I'm sorry.
It comes later.
It comes later when you get to the finish.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to note, I just like to note this because you're not climbing a lot at the end, but in mile 25, any climb, it's hurts so bad, right? Mile 26, you're climbing at mile 26 in this race, 20 feet, both of those, there at the end, in as you climb up Central Park South, and as you go into Central Park and get to the finish line, that's all uphill. Again, these aren't huge climbs, these are 20 feet, but you're going to be hurting real bad. So just know that those are coming. Yeah, that's the climbs. We're going to go through each of the sections of the race.
And then there's some visuals, and these are all taken from the NYR site as well. You can find these on
Yes.
the marathon court, on the marathon itself. So as we head through the first, again, we talked about the first mile being very uphill. You know, the Garmin is likely not going to be your friend on the bridge with everybody standing around you. So those are going to be, and this is where I've always, you know, I've never throughout training when I work with folks, I've never been a big fan of the whole current pace per mile. That's on the bottom. You know, when you first buy your Garmin, it comes with 3 fields: distance, time, and current pace per mile. I often, you know, come race day, probably consider getting rid of that field, like just distance and total time, and drop the current pace per mile, because there's just too much going on around for that to be accurate. Because remember, and as Kristen noted, you're running the race course. You're not running a marathon to a Garmin. You're running a race course, and so I think it becomes important to note that as you go through. Another feature too is consider turning off the auto lap per mile feature on your watch. So if your watch currently beeps and vibrates every mile that you run on when you're heading out the door, turn that function off on race day.
I don't actually do that, and I don't do that other part either. But what I do is
this is why we get along so well.
But I do use it's a separate download from the Garmin App Store. There's a Race Pace is one of the names of the apps. But what it displays is current pace, average pace, and then also, but what I really go by is elapsed time. It also has distance, it also has heart rate, and it's all on one screen. And I use that as a pacer. I use that. I need all of that information. I do really actually, when I'm pacing like a marathon, I usually go by the 5K splits, and that's what I go off of. I'm not going off of every single mile, particularly for this race, New York City Marathon, which has all these ups and downs, and your pace is not going to be consistent. It should not be consistent, right? 1 mile, this mile 1 should be a lot slower than mile 2. That's the way the course is, right? So if you're going off of every single mile trying to hit some designated pace, your brain's gonna be fried and overloaded by the time you get to mile 26. But I do like to go by an average again and try to make my 5K splits pretty relatively even, and use elapsed time.
And those of you who are joining us on on the Zoom right now, in the chat function, someone sent a link to the Garmin app that Kristen just mentioned, and we'll share that out to everybody as well.
Hey, that's awesome.
Thanks, Tamers.
Thank you.
A quick question.
Yeah.
Which waves go over the bridge?
Green is the only one that goes
Green.
under.
Green's under.
Yeah, so orange is on the left side, closer to the city, and blue is on the right side.
Is there any advantage or disadvantage to a color, or is it all pretty much the same?
Well, green, there's less of an incline on the lower portion, but I mean, it's not significant difference. The elites run from blue, so people like to think that that's the better, but
Yeah,
It's all the same.
yeah, it's
No.
all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even if that's the elevation isn't that much different, because you're already starting lower on the lower level, and then you exit lower as well. So the incline off the bridge
yeah,
is actually steeper from the lower level. So it's all semantics.
yeah,
There's
it's a
no-
wash.
Yeah, there's nothing there. Right. And then we have a stretch here as you go from Bay Ridge into Sunset Park. It's a pretty flat stretch as you go through 4th Avenue. You navigated the bridge and you get off the bridge, and now you kind of just you begin heading in a long straightaway down 4th Avenue. And, we've mentioned just kind of this part here, Bay Ridge and Sunset Park, but you will continue on 4th Avenue all the way through the 8 mile mark, just through a different neighborhood as you get into Park Slope and downtown Brooklyn. But again, this is where I think this is where you want the stuff you're carrying. Again, that whole thing of being self-sufficient, at least with liquids through this part, I think is important. That as you start getting into Bay Ridge and Sunset Park, start consuming what you're holding. And then so you can prepare to ditch it as you get into Park Slope.
Yeah, and my advice, particularly for this race, is to keep telling yourself over and over, chill, chill, chill. Literally, because there is an insane amount of excitement. They're blasting Frank Sinatra. Freaking cannons are going off. There's helicopters flying around you. Then you get off the bridge and you go into Brooklyn, and there's literally thousands of people like, calling out. If you have your name on your shirt, they'll be calling your name. I mean, it's like you feel like you're like, the rock star at Lollapalooza, or I don't know what, but like all of the energy, you're going to be amped up and hyped up to the max, and you really need to keep it down, keep it under wraps. So actively tell yourself, calm down, stay cool.
And this is where you want to pay attention to the people around you. Make sure you're not running faster than everybody else around you. Right? Because the theory is we're all seated based on time. So if you're running faster than everybody around you, that's probably a sign you're running too fast. As we get into the second portion of the race, we go through Park Slope, which is miles 6, 7, and 8. As you're heading down 4th Avenue, you'll see a bridge going across over 4th Avenue. That's the F train as it heads into the city. The 10K mark is at that bridge. So as you're running down 4th Avenue, you're looking for something in the distance, that is the 10K marker is at that bridge where the F train is located.
The other part that's like when the colors merge together, that's another part where it's like the energy is just explosive. I can't explain it. You'll experience it when you're there, but you can see all these people coming together and funneling together. And it's just like, it's a crazy sensation. But you feel this collective sense of like, power, right? It's good, but it's also mile 8. So you really got to chill, chill. Too early. It's too early.
Focusing on the next part here as you go through miles 10 through 15, we'll kind of break this up into different subsections. So Williamsburg is miles 8 through 12. Again, it's kind of downtown Brooklyn, quickly into Fort Greene, quickly into Williamsburg. They subsequently go through the neighborhoods. So you'll have a couple of turns as you head through Williamsburg. The biggest turn that most people realize is you get off of Lafayette and onto Bedford, and the 15K mark is 2 blocks after you make that turn. Again, you want to keep continuing to focus on your fueling in this stage, focus on the crowds, the energy. The last few years, I've been at the 15K mark working the race. And, when I first get out there in the morning, as the elites go by, there's not many people. By the time everybody else starts coming through, Adder Run comes out there and they're a full city block with speakers. You go a couple blocks down. But the irony is, once you go a couple blocks past 15K, you go through the Orthodox section of the city and it is crickets. It just becomes very quiet. So it's a matter of balancing that energy that you're going to get from the crowd at 15K when you make the turn to then all of a sudden it gets quiet again as you head through some sections of Williamsburg, and then gets loud again as you go through the more densely populated neighborhoods, like, past the L train stops and places like that.
Yeah, it gets a little weird here, just to note in your brain. We experienced this last year, but the outdoor dining there through those sections of Brooklyn and that narrow, it's already a narrower street than some of those other parts of Park Slope that you run through early on. And then also they have the outdoor dining on top of that. So there are some sections there where you have this much space and then you have this much space. It gets really tight. You can see it up ahead and just know and plan for it. Don't be on the edges there because you're going to get smushed. And so for this section particularly, this guy's like, the football guy with the.
No, but it's a good point. You're heading down 4th Avenue and it is what's three and three, right? 3 car lanes and 3 car lanes.
Yeah.
By the time you get to Bedford Avenue in Williamsburg, it is what should be, if it was the full street, 2 sides of parking and a travel car lane with a little bit of space for a bike lane. But then now you also have outdoor dining in the parking lane. So it gets a little dicey. Essentially the race course gets cut in half, but it's not as you get from between mile 8 and mile 12. The width of the road cuts in half. So I'm going to deviate quick. There was a question in the chat section about the pacers themselves and like, what is their strategy? This gets a little tricky in that pacers have different strategies. So oftentimes there's multiple pacers per time, and some of them will run different strategies. Some of them will run even pace. Some of them will run even effort, which means if they're running even pace, that's obvious. If they're going to run even effort, that effort's going to change throughout the course of the race. So likely that effort is you're likely to be, by the time you get to Williamsburg in the half, if you're running according to even effort based upon the course as it's laid out in front of you, you're probably behind schedule as you're getting through Williamsburg. You're probably still going to be behind whatever your goal pace is, because we'll talk a little bit about that as we get through into Manhattan. Manhattan is some of the sections where you make, quote unquote, make up time in the second half of the race. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, about the course itself, but the pacers kind of vary. In previous years, when the pre-pandemic, some of the pacers have been at the Expo, so you have the opportunity to actually go and chat with them about what's your strategy, even effort, even pace. I can't guarantee that every pace, right? No pacer is going to sit there for 3 straight days, but it might not be a bad idea to maybe take an informal survey of some of the ones, even if you're not going to run with them. Right, just be like, are you planning even effort, even pace? And try to maybe gauge that when you're in the corral, as Kristen mentioned, when you're trying to make your way closer to the pacer, potentially try to find out if they're running even pace or even effort. There's no way to answer that. So sorry to.
I like, as a pacer, when people talk to me, and I like knowing people's names. Please go up and talk to the pacer.
Yeah,
if you're going to run with them for a marathon, especially, like, you get to know each other. And so ask the pacer what they plan to do. That's what you should do.
Yeah. And then as we head into Queens and we head over the Pulaski Bridge, the halfway towards the Queensborough. So, there's a bunch of turns for those who may be up, we talked a little bit about the median finish time earlier, right? Those of you who may be closer to the front, this is where, you start getting into a bunch of turns through Brooklyn and Queens. This is where tangents become important. We've talked a little bit about the race course is going to measure, you're likely going to be long. The actual joke or the fact of an actual race course measurement is a course is measured long. For someone who has done course measurement in the past and knows the strategy of it, it's already measured 1 meter long for every kilometer. So before the race even starts, you're already going to run 42 meters longer than the race course. And then from there, it just becomes how far do you deviate from the way the course is measured, depends on how much further than the race course you run.
Yes, but my tip is I wouldn't try to fight through a bunch of people to run the tangents because you're just gonna burn up more energy trying to do that. And so be as smart as you can, but also conserve energy, right? You know, so it's not worth fighting through 10 people to like be on the, there is a blue line painted. It's not worth fighting through people all race long to stay on the blue line. You know,
And the
there's,
blue line's not even the actual course measurement.
no, and I know that too.
The blue line's not the course measurement.
Yes. One thing I also want to bring up about this is the wind, and but especially on the Pulaski, if it is a windy day, the Pulaski Bridge you'll feel it, because there's no protection on that bridge at all. Hopefully it won't be windy and that won't be an issue, but if so, there's always a ton of people around you, so use people as your shield.
So I'll answer the second question first in the chat. So I'm answering some chat questions. The blue line is not the tangent. So it is not how the course is measured. The blue line is the universal color of world athletics to signify what the race course is. It is not the tangent. It is not the measured race course. And we'll answer the second question here in a moment, which is about how to deal with some of the quieter sections as we go through the Queensborough Bridge. So when we talk a little bit here about the silence, so there was the you'll get through, we talked a little bit about the silence in Brooklyn. There'll be more silence here in the Queensborough Bridge. I think my advice is to navigate through it. Is one, make sure you're not running faster than the people around you. Again, you should still be roughly the same pace as everybody around you. The second thing would be if you're not with Whippets, again, we've talked about using the Google Doc in an effort to pair up, group up, etc. Make friends with a complete stranger. You know, oftentimes those who maybe, find someone who's in a running club, who's in another running club, are usually your best bets, because there are people who are, and I'm not trying to knock anybody who's around you in a marathon is clearly fit, right? So that's not knocking anybody, but if they're in a running club, they've likely trained with people, they're used to running with people, and so they may in fact engage with you. And find someone, and this is different for everybody, if you're going to engage with someone, find someone who's not wearing a set of headphones. Some people choose to run with music, some people don't. I've never been a music person, and I just think that just comes from my personal running history. Because we didn't have like wireless earbuds and, carrying a Walkman. Thanks. Carrying a Walkman in the 90s was a little different. I let your comments, I let your Lollapalooza comments slide. I let it slide, but fine, be that way. But I think it's, just find, make friends with a complete stranger if you have to, and if you don't find a Whippet around, or maybe you see a Whippet who's 30 meters in front of you and be like, all right, let me just keep them the same distance, or maybe you ease your way into going to catch them, something like that. That's some of the ways to navigate some of the quieter sections.
I love the quiet on this course because it's not going to come very much. And this whole race is like overstimulation to the max. Like you finish and you feel like you've done cocaine for an hour. I don't know what that's like, but I can assume. But no, like, no, like those points where it is quiet and it's like, I like that, because you're not going to have very many on this race. So, but that's how I deal with it. What else to say about this? It's the bridge. If you haven't run Queensborough Bridge in training, you're doing everything wrong. If you live in New York, I'm just talking to New Yorkers here. So
you've ruined your internet following.
Yes.
Now.
Oh, the other thing, this is my favorite tip about Queensborough Bridge. It's a longer uphill coming from the Queens side into Manhattan than the Manhattan side to the Queens side. So if you are like me, a Manhattanite, and you run a lot in the other direction, Manhattan to Queens, you're missing out on all the fun, which is going the other direction because it's longer uphill that way. You'll get to do it on race day though.
Now, as we head into
First
We'll,
Avenue.
I'll steal a phrase from Kristen here, as we head into Cocaine Alley, which is First Avenue in the city. You know, one of the things that, if you've never run New York before, one of the things, now, and personally I haven't either, but one of the things I'm told is there is nothing like the roaring crowd you hear as you descend the Queensborough onto First Avenue, and as you can just hear it coming, and just what it's like coming down the bridge. And for those of you who have done it and you know what the experience is like, if probably describing it, you can probably even feel the chills up your back right now if you've done it before. So it's another one of those places where you got to rein it in and just be conscious of what's going on.
Yeah, no, Kris is right. It is a huge rush, and it's okay to have a little tiny rush there, but you don't want to let it get yourself carried away. The other part is that even when you're coming off the bridge and you turn onto First Avenue, that part of First Avenue does have some downhill to it as well. And so between that and the crowd, you can easily find yourself running 30 seconds faster than your goal pace, and that's too fast for that early in the race. So a little faster is fine, but keep it in control, keep that chill going that you started with the race with.
And we talk about that if you're, we talked earlier about pacers, that they're going to be even effort, even pace. This is often a place where people find time, even unintentionally. That if you're behind schedule at your pace per mile, your 5K splits, whatever you were planning in your head, this is often a place where people come and find it, is just the crowds and the downhill as you go up First Avenue. The trick you want to keep in mind is that as you're heading up First Avenue, and we're getting into the later stage of the race beyond mile 20, is as you're heading through, the crowds get less and less the further north you go. So to Kristen's point, it's very easy to find 15, 20 seconds in a mile, but then as you beyond that, you need to be careful that you're not continuing that same 15. Like, it's okay to get the adrenaline rush, but then you got to start dialing it back down a little bit. And then you finally get into the Bronx at mile 21. And yes, another bridge, because that's what we do. And then your fifth and final borough before coming back into Manhattan.
The Bronx is a lot of turns, so it goes by so quickly because you get there and you literally are turning the entire time you're in the Bronx, and then all of a sudden you're back in Manhattan again. But the crowds are thinner there. There's always music and stuff going, so there is like some excitement, but it's not like that like wall and sea of people that you will find at other parts of the race.
And then also look for the Whippet's cheer station.
Oh,
as well.
that's right.
So cheer station is in the Bronx. The joke I like to make about our cheer station is we are kind of on the wrong side of the road. So the road is curving to the left and we're on the right side of the road. So if you're looking to run tangents, just wave at them. Maybe don't, if your day's not going so well and you want to socialize with all the people, head on over. But if you're looking to run fast, just give them a wave from the other side of the road as you roll by.
Yes.
All right.
That's true.
And then as we head back now into Manhattan and take on Harlem and Fifth Avenue. This is where I think it's important to start, managing, all the elements that are at you. And, we mentioned bite-sized pieces here as it relates to traveling through this area. I'm also going to use it in a second way when it comes to bite-size, that as you're continuing to fuel through this area, particularly beyond the 30K even, so even 18 miles, I start to become more of a nibbler and a sipper. And what I mean by that is the group packet I may be carrying, or your gel, whatever your preferred, nutrition is, I will only consume like a fraction of it and then chase it with some water and then hold the rest of it and then nibble on it again and then chase it with some water and nibble on it. It's the idea of just kind of continuing to put nutrition in your body late in the race. And this is a strategy I usually start employing right around the 30K mark. And another piece with it too is for personally, I don't consume a lot of caffeine in my diet. So I notice the caffeine gels versus the non-caffeinated gels. So early on in the race, I'm usually consuming non-caffeinated gels. And then right around that 30K mark, I start switching to caffeinated gels because of the idea, because I actually feel it. So I think it's, yeah, again, everybody, you look, I'm not telling you to like change your nutrition strategy that you've been practicing for 8 weeks. Like, don't do that. But just some small little things, maybe you can, there are ways you can get around that as well. Because again, as Kristen mentioned, there's so many adrenaline rushes and caffeine rushes as you're going through the race that, try to kind of save it if you can nutritionally for maybe later in the race.
Yeah, one thing I like in terms of the nutrition, I like to remind people is that just because you're past the 20-mile mark doesn't mean you should stop taking things in. People like get that in their head. They're like, I passed 20, I'm done, quote unquote. This 10K that's the worst 10K of your life. That moment. So keep doing all the things that you've been doing, do them harder, do them with more focus, with more intention, right? Concentrate on your form, moving your legs, like getting that quick turnover. You're going to have to work doubly hard to do it. Make sure you are doing that. Keep your shoulders relaxed, your jaw relaxed. Drink at every aid station. Keep taking in fuel. Don't stop, right? All the way up there. There'll be aid stations all the way through. So use them. Don't pass them by.
And I think this is also another place as well where at some point, every running event is a race. And I think at some point you have to become into race mode and you have to start engaging with people around you. And that when you're out there and you've run 20 some odd miles with roughly the same people around you, you need to start staying with them and you just start engaging with them. Now, look, if someone rolls by you because they were either running a negative split or whatever like that, like let them go. But if someone kind of creeps up next to you and like is barely inching their way by you, consider engaging with them. Now, whether that's verbal or just physically engaging with them to just try to like hang on, like I didn't mean like elbow. Jeez, we're stuck in like in terms of like trying to stay with them, start choosing to stay with people, start kind of, going through and making sure you try to stay with them. When you start having these time goals to engage with one person after another can take your mind off of the race for 30, 60, 90 seconds as you go through this area. So I think that's another important piece.
Yeah, my personal strategy is not really to use people as much, but to use objects to head. But it's the same idea. But it's literally just like, get me to that tree for the love of God. Just get me to that tree. As you're going up Fifth Avenue, the blocks are counting down, so you can see that. And I think that's a huge motivator. As you're counting down, you're getting closer to Central Park. So all of that, let that give you hope, right? As you cross one block down, oh yes, I made it one more block. Use whatever tools that that you possibly can to claw your way through these sections. Yeah. Next thing.
And then we get into Central Park. So we enter Central Park just before mile 24, and then you start navigating your way south through the park in the opposite direction. So we talked about the hill that's just before you get into the park, and then you have to kind of stay at that elevation for a little bit. The downhill that you get for that uphill is Cat Hill. That's the downhill you get from it, but it's a long way. It doesn't happen right away. So you have to get all the way to Cat Hill before you get the reprieve from the climb you made outside of Central Park.
Delayed gratification.
Yes. And then as we all know, there's going to be ups and downs as you go through Central Park. You do get the downhill at Cat Hill, but then there's a speed bump as you go past, center stage, right? So you go past that, then you have the downhill as you descend out of the park and onto Central Park South. But then as we talked about Central Park South, there's a false flat uphill all the way across to Central Park West. So it is.
The crowds in all of this in section from Central Park through to the end are huge, deep, and they are excited to see you. Use them, use that energy. I like to do things like if I'm hurting really badly, I raise my hands in the air. And people love that. They think that you're, like it gets them excited. It gets me excited. Like at that point, you take whatever jolt of energy you can, right? So things like that, like doing this, simple things, always like cheering for yourself. At that point, I'm usually like cheering for people around me. And these miles, 24, 25, and 26, that is more when I would engage with people. Like someone's running beside me, I'm like, yeah, you got this, like silly things like that. Whatever nonsense is like my brain, you're not thinking at that point. It's just coming out, but use like, it's all good vibes, right? Good energy, good vibes. Take what the crowd is giving you, take the energy from the people around you, to keep going.
Yeah. And as you're heading through the downhill, as you're exiting the park, there's usually a group of whippets that is on that downhill on the right side. So yes, the official cheer station, but some of the Brooklyn whippets will cheer for you. You'll see them in Brooklyn and they kind of move around, but a lot of them congregate on that downhill. So as you're heading down, there's nothing to your left. There's only people to your right. On that right side, there's usually a group of whippets over there. I've gone there in previous years and met a few folks. So there's also a group of folks there. So look for them there as well. Just as you go past 40 kilometers. And then we get to the finish line. And then we finish on another uphill.
My favorite part of this is like, because you can see the finish line coming. There's the flags on either side. And your brain goes, I'm going to kick to the finish. I'm going to kick to the finish. And you're like, am I crawling right now? What happened?
And who threw the piano on my back?
There's no kick there. I
there's
mean,
no-
you
yeah.
can try, but but that is an incredible finish. From 400 meters on, again, there's flags, there's grandstands on either side of you. They have the big screens and, you'll be excited. You will be pumped up at that point. Also, all of us New Yorkers, like we know what's coming when we make the turn, that last turn to go into Central Park. So that anticipation alone is exciting. It's hard, but again, like you're going to be so close at that point. You can just push through, just push through.
And then we also note here, don't be the person who gets their finishers photos with them looking down at their watch. Roadrunners does a pretty good job at timekeeping. It'll be all right. The extra like 2 seconds that, or 5 seconds after you click your garment, it's all right. Like, let it slide. Let it slide. Let it slide. And then we'll talk, so obviously the slide's a little sideways. We'll talk a little bit here about exiting Central Park post-race as well. Depending on how the day goes after you cross the finish line, I also have a finish line access pass this year. So you may actually see me as you head through the finish line. So I'm going to try to hang around there for the day. So you may actually get one more chance to hear my voice throughout the rest of this. But yes, this is like the longest walk of your life as you go through this.
They made it longer this year.
They did.
I just want everyone to know they
They
made
did.
you walk longer
They did.
after the marathon
They
this
did.
year.
Yeah. And when it comes to meeting up with people, if you have friends or family who are coming to meet you, there's an extensive frozen zone outside of Central Park that no one can come inside of. Part of your pre-race planning is plan your post-race as well, which is if you're meeting friends and family before you come to the Whippets after party, make sure that have them stay at a location and you go to them. Don't have them try to find you. Again, depending on whether or not you leave your cell phone, you may not have your phone, right? If you're not committed to leaving your cell phone with bad check, you're not going to have it. So you got to stick to the plan that to your post-race meetup spot with any friends or family.
Yeah, I have nothing to add about that.
Okay.
Oh, everybody gets a poncho this year, so that's nice.
Yeah,
That's your prize for walking further.
for walking further. So again, kind of a little bit more here about what Probably guess I was a slide too early on this one.
Yeah.
My bad. But just if possible, say hi to the volunteers and thank you. Give me one sec. And say stuff to the volunteers. Another piece that I don't know if maybe we didn't mention it, or with my luck, it's probably on the next slide because apparently I'm one slide ahead this whole presentation. There is no shame in admitting you need help at the finish line. If you need medical assistance, if you're having trouble walking, if you need a chair for a couple of minutes, there's no shame in that. Like, don't be a freaking hero. Like, seek out medical. It's okay. Like, there's no. It's tough, and we don't know what the weather. We can't sit here today and tell you what the weather's going to be like. It's fine. Plenty of more talented people than us sitting in the room have been in medical tents before. So there's no shame in that. So don't take anything with that. Sorry. Yes, I didn't.
Yeah. Last year, for some reason, I got the impression that like it wasn't worth it to do bag check because it took too long to get the bag check or something after the race. Is that still the case? I just got that impression.
You have to walk further than you
So
might.
the question is
want
it
to,
worth
you
doing
have
the
to-
bad check?
Oh, yeah. No, that's fine. So you have to exit at 72nd, but the bag to pick up the bag is down at 72nd, or sorry, you exit at 77. You have to go all the way south to 72nd to pick up the bag afterwards. You may already be going in that direction, so it's fine. You might if you were already walking south, it's the same difference. But if you want to get out and exit quickly, you can do that there at 77 and not go all the way back south if you don't have a bag,
Right. So
right?
So we
It
brought
just
the map.
depends. It depends on where you live and where you're going and that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, here's the map.
Yeah. So I brought the map, and sorry, it's sideways. We couldn't get this.
Yeah.
The Zoom would not work if you turned it the other
Yeah,
way.
so you have to exit all the way at the top up there, but the bag check is all the way down at the bottom there of the park. That's it. Yeah.
Well, that means we put those little red arrows, so we can exit out on 76th Street. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
but they're,
That was not the case last time.
Yeah, they made you go north last year.
last year you exited at 72nd.
Right. So the gray.
See, where but in the park,
Yeah.
you have to continue up through the park,
Right.
through the main drive, through Park Drive
Right.
to
Yeah.
77.
So those have done this before, where after you cross the finish line, so we're gonna go from right to left on this map, from the finish line. The purple section on West Drive is where all the amenities are. In previous years, you used to be able to take the left turn at the 72nd Street
Yeah,
cross drive and get out and exit onto Central Park West. You can, no matter what, and that was if you didn't check a bag. You picked up your bag north of 72nd Street
mhm.
in the park. That has changed where now everybody has to leave up to 77th Street, and then you exit and come back down to get your baggage. Now, why that is, only Roadrunners can answer. All we can tell you is what the facts are. So,
But the red arrows are where you can exit from the frozen zone. Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And
I
then,
don't know. I think we're maybe at the end.
yeah,
Oh,
I
no,
got one
close.
more, yeah. So,
Okay.
so some post-marathon stuff, both day of and after the marathon. You want to consume as much food and protein as you can. So take, none of us, I don't want to say none of us, most of us are probably not hungry when you cross the finish line of a marathon. But take the bag, take the stuff, because when you do get hungry, you then don't want to start looking around for food. So again, be self-sufficient. So take whatever they give you and make sure you're carrying it so that when you do get hungry, as you're navigating your way through this mile-long freaking walk in and out of Central Park, you have food with you so that you can consume that. And again, it's also the sodium as well. That's the other part too. That if you're not consuming sodium, any water you take, you just will eventually just ends up in your bladder without passing through your cells. So it's also important to consume sodium as well.
No, other than to say, that walk, you're gonna be hobbling. Most everybody's gonna be hobbling, like shuffling, hobbling. So don't underestimate how long that's gonna take, right? And you're gonna be cold and tired, and just, so I definitely recommend taking the bag, the recovery bag that they're gonna give you, and taking, and like drinking and eating something out of it as you go along. It's gonna be like 20 minutes plus. That's if you're like moving well,
Yeah.
so just
Yeah.
plan for that.
So, and then as you post marathon, we'll do a couple of things, which is, you can't, rush your recovery either. Like, be smart about what you do in the days after the marathon. You'll again continue to see wisdom pieces annoyingly from me after the race is over. But just be smart about what you do. One of the, if you can believe it, because many of us are here type A, the most common question I get after the marathon is, when can I run again? First of all, you're an idiot, but the simple answer I often tell people is 5 days, or whenever you miss the sport of running, whichever comes first. So that is often, because you go through this and you give up, you spent the last couple of months of your life, literally of your life, giving up social things, time with your friends, family, concerts, eating out, getting drunk on a weekend, whatever, that those are things you may want to do when you're getting into the holiday season. Thanksgiving is, a couple of weeks away, and you may just not be in the mood, and that's okay. Like, just enjoy whatever you want to do, and whatever you feel like running again, that's the right answer. So I often say 5 days, or whenever you feel like actually running again, whichever comes first.
I do recommend walking.
Yes.
And I do actually recommend walking the same day as the marathon. That sounds crazy. But if you go home and you sit all day, you're going to get so stiff. Everything's going to lock up. Like, just a little bit of walking, like hours later that evening for dinner, just go around your block 1 time or 2 times. That's it. Very simple, low key, but movement is good, right? You don't need to turn into a complete potato. Easy movement.
One question that came through the chat is where are the punches, in the park or outside the park this year?
I saw that.
Like,
I don't know the answer exactly.
Yeah.
If it's on I think it might be on the slide before, the map slide. I'm not sure. That's a good question.
So
I think that's it,
I
unless
think
people
that's-
have additional Q&A.
I think we've kind of been doing that in live
That's
action
what we've
right
been
now.
doing.
So
Yeah,
we've been doing that.
unless anyone has any more.
Other than that, it's time to drop the hammer. So
Or elbows if you're Kris.
maybe just bring a hammer.
I
So-
do not condone violence.
So before we close out, we want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I did see it.
Oh,
Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thanks to Amity Downtown for being our gracious host for this evening. Please come join us if you can on a Monday night for an easy run down here. Come join us the day after the marathon. Show off your medal. Come hang out with us. There'll be plenty of people here who will not want to run on Monday. So definitely come join us. We will be sharing both the presentation, and we are recording this presentation now. So we'll post that to I think Kristen will share it to her personal coaching page, and we'll share that YouTube link out for everyone to re-listen to our voices for 75 minutes if you feel like it. We might be pushing 80 right now, actually. Actually, a little more than that.
yeah.
So thank you all for joining us, and good luck in New York City.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming. Oh, Russell. Bye, Russell. There's people I know here. Okay, bye, everyone.